Good evening, I'm Claudia-Liza and welcome to this special programme dedicated to male mental health. Now, it is a shocking and worrying fact that in the UK, the single biggest cause of death among men under 45 is suicide. Now, the reasons behind that statistic are varied and complex, but there are some issues that are too important to ignore. Why are so many men suffering? Why don't they feel able to talk about it? And what, as family, friends and as a society, can we do to help? Well, here on 5 News Tonight, we're examining each of those issues and, most importantly, we're going to talk, because by starting a conversation, we want to end the stigma that surrounds men's mental health. Well, in the studio with me, we have a group of men, each with their very own personal stories to tell. Some have attempted suicide, others have lost loved ones to suicide. We'll be speaking to them shortly. First, though, in our exclusive survey, we asked men with mental health struggles to tell us about their problems. Our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman, has some of the findings.
Even when everything looks good on the outside, someone's body can be healthy when their mind is not. When it comes to men, they are far more likely to conceal those lows under the surface, to feel that pain in silence. We surveyed more than 500 men who have struggled with their mental health. More than half told us they hide their problems. Many said their family and friends aren't aware, and 40% feel embarrassed by their struggles. Our responders don't like being told to man up, the idea that men are expected to be strong and in control. In reality, they are weighed down by pressures, from family problems to body image, telling us the biggest contributors to their mental health problems are anxiety, money worries, work issues, relationship issues, and long-standing depression. In 2017, there were almost 6,000 suicides recorded in Britain, and 75% of those were men. 2/3 of the men we surveyed have thought about taking their own life, and 1/4 have tried. Pain on the inside is easier to hide, but silence can be deadly.
I'm sure those findings resonate with some of you at home. They certainly do with the men in our audience here. Let's talk to a few of them now. First, let's talk about the stresses men face. For you, Darren, it started actually when you were a child, really young. Your parents broke up, you then got involved with the wrong crowd at school, and then it sort of spiralled into your adult life as well.
Yes, that's right. I mean, I was your stereotypical bloke, really. I was struggling a lot in the past. And when I was drinking a lot, like you said, I was taking drugs a lot, stuff like that. And a lot of that was to mask the way I was feeling. It was to mask, I didn't really know what had gone on. I hadn't had a diagnosis, so to speak. And that's how I was using it. I was using drink and going out as a way to cope. I just didn't think I could speak to anyone and I had anyone to talk to.
Garrick, for you, you lost a member of your family, and that impacted, obviously, your mental health. That affected your work, your marriage, your relationship.
Yeah, my own journey is quite diverse in that way. Yes, I had family bereavement. I also had a very high-powering job at university, and due to the stress from the relationship, I had to take early retirement after 12 years due to my ill health, anxiety, depression. You get to a position where you suddenly have a change in your life and not understanding what's going on. And as a professional person, you don't really feel you can go to somebody. You felt you got to. For me, I just kept it all in.
Leon, your story also very different from Garrick, from Darren, in that you were a successful footballer, Premier League footballer. You were a boxer. You look like a man who had it all. But what your story tells us is no matter what you have, no matter how successful you are, anyone can be affected by mental health issues.
Well, this is it. It came down to the back end of my career. My coping mechanisms weren't as I thought. I struggled and I hit rock bottom. And I guess along the way, you learn to educate yourself, and I had to do that. But it came down to, at that particular time in my life, where trying to attempt suicide was rock bottom for me. And that was a time that I didn't fight it. I didn't see the hope, and I didn't want to fight back. I just had no strength in me. I think what it really comes down to, and no matter what I achieved in my careers and where I stood from an achievement point of view, career-wise, is that I'm a human being. And I think no matter what we do as individuals, as men, it's all about trying to be true to ourselves and understand that, you know what, we can speak at the worst times and get the right help. Because if you do fight and get help and talk, as I always say, I believe in that message because it's a powerful message, and that's where I believe in. That's what I believe in today.
Well, Liam, we're going to hear a lot more from you. Hopefully, get some advice as well, and from the rest of our guests tonight. But first, one of the main findings of our survey is the strain of suffering in silence. Nearly 60% of men who responded said that they hide their problems. 40% said they're embarrassed about their mental health struggles. And we understand it's not easy to talk. So if you are affected by any of the issues in this programme and you want to talk in confidence, there are plenty of places to go. The address for the Samaritans in Mind are on your screen now. And if you head to our Facebook page, you can find even more resources. And finally, if you'd like to join in our conversation, then do let us know your thoughts and your stories. We're streaming live on Facebook right now, so you can leave a comment for us there. Just head to Facebook and search for 5 News. Or on Twitter, you can send us your message with the hashtag Breaking the Silence. But now, Andy's Man Club is just one organisation that's offering men a place to open up without judgment. It has groups all over the country. Well, in a moment, we'll hear from its founder, Luke Ambler. But first, let's hear from some of the men who've used the club and bounced back from rock bottom.
Men feel like they can't talk about their mental health. Men feel silenced.
Men don't talk because it's seen in your circle of friends possibly as being weak. It's not the manly thing to do. You get told to man up, you know, get over it, get over yourself. It's all right, have a drink, it'll be all right, everything will move on, you'll be okay tomorrow. And it's just not that easy. Lost my house, lost my job through illness and injury, which sort of sent me a bit sideways. I became a good actor is probably the best way to look at it. I was very much still the life and soul and went out, but it was just really hard work. It was an act all the time.
On the 26th of October 2008, I got the unfortunate news that my partner had passed away. She took her life, unfortunately, while she was 38 weeks pregnant with my daughter. Now that, as a historic event, I really struggled with. I pushed people away. I had friends that ended up fighting over, and I just really didn't want to be here anymore. So I tried to take my own life.
I had a difficult childhood. I didn't have positive relationships with my parents. Difficult adolescence. I spent some time in jail. I didn't do well in relationships either. My last relationship was perhaps my most dysfunctional. This perfect storm of negativity and sadness and upset came to a head, and I ended up in hospital. I didn't want to die, I know that, and I knew that when I was doing it, but the crisis was that bad and that deep that I didn't know what to do. To be fair, I was lost.
I actually broke down one day at home, just sat at the top of the stairs crying, and I knew I needed help. And I'm on various medications for illness and injury, so I didn't want to go down the medication route with doctors with various things, so did a bit of research, found Andy's Man Club.
Not talking about it was definitely one of the factors of me trying to take my life so many times. now that I see that talking it has such a massive effect on so many people, I wish I'd have done it back then. I always say I wish there was an Andy's Man Club then, because maybe I'd have talked about it, and I'd have been better a long time ago, rather than waiting 8 years to grieve and then finding out that it's okay to grieve.
I never ever spoke to any of my close friends or my family about my mental health issues that I'd endured for pretty much my whole life. And when I was 50 years old, it was the first time I'd spoke in front of people, guys, about the issues that had brought me there. And the feeling of being free and your emotions being able to be let loose was just amazing for me.
Luke, as I said, you founded Andy's Man Club. I can see the emotion in your eyes just listening to the difference it's made with just the men that we spoke to. You founded it and you named it after Andy, your brother-in-law. Out of all the things you could have done to remember him, why did you decide to set up this group?
That's just got me, that video. Do you know, seeing those three guys.
Clearly see that.
Because those three guys all now facilitate our groups after they walk through that door. But you know, Andy was a real special guy, you know, a real top bloke, and I'll never forget, he were at our house the weekend before, laughing and joking, and great dad, great bloke. And you know, when I got the phone call, I'll never forget, off my mother-in-law, who I co-founded this charity with, she just said, Andrew died, and I had no idea how he died, and I didn't really know too much about suicide. No one really spoke about it then, and when I got there, the devastation were like nothing. And being from rugby and having my own background and story, I'd been through a lot of stuff, but this was just a completely different pain. And I always say, people always say, why did you set the club up? And initially, and you know, it's not in a bad thing to any of those guys, it might be selfish, it was to stop other families going through what our family went through. Because when I turned up at my mum's house when my little boy Alfie were there, and Alfie and Andy were like two peas in a pod, and I always say, when we had to tell Alfie that his uncle Andy had died, the screeching which he let out as a 6-year-old boy is like nothing I've ever witnessed. And it absolutely rocked me as a bloke and as a man, because as a father, all you want to do is be able to protect your kids from pain, and it ruined me. So I decided that there needs to be a space where men like Andy could come, no judgment, just better take your mask off, open up, like I'd needed in past, like all these guys here needed. And that first night turned up, 9 men turned up, week after 15 men turned up, and then 3 years ago to this day, we're here now. I took a selfie with an OK sign, and you know, 4 weeks later, 100 million people had bought into the fact that it were okay to talk. So yeah, it's just seeing that video, yeah, really, just really at home how far those guys have come. And last night we had, you know, this month, on the way here, I just got a message off Sabrina, who just said we've had just under 3,000 men use it this month alone in July, which is just beautiful. And can really see what a difference talking, something so simple, but a huge difference it makes. And for you, Johnny, you were dealing with a lot of things, schizophrenia, bipolar. You were very, very low in 2008, and that was one of the issues. You had no one to talk to, and yet, incredibly, you were at a point where you wanted to take your own life, and it was a stranger who talked to you that was able to stop you from doing that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and I don't want to be too sort of critical, but I kind of did have people sort of that were there, but because I was in hospital at the time, I was in a psychiatric hospital, and I'd been there for a month, but the difference with this guy on the bridge that stopped me, he just, in the hospital, everything was done behind a clipboard, and everything's like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10? Whereas this guy on the bridge, he just was like, it's all right, mate, just. And he looked at me, and he was just, there was something about him, he was just so calm and just so invested and empathetic and non-judgmental, and he wanted to talk. That's the thing. Like in the hospital where I was, I kept on being sent back to the suicide ward because I was talking about suicide. And, you know, they would just sit and watch me 24/7. They wouldn't engage with me, but this guy wanted to engage, and he just really cared. And for me, I think the thing that really got to me was when he was like, mate, you're going to be all right, you know, you're going to get better. And no one had said that to me before in the hospital. But this positivity that he had, and this kind of, like I said, the empathy and the non-judgment, that's what got through to me, I think. But, and what we say, because we now work together, and what we say is anyone can do that, just being human, just being human, like the guys in the clubs, you know, just being human and just listening, just holding the space for someone. Yeah, it can save a life. Yeah.
Well, let's take a bit more of a look at some of the things other men told us in this survey. Now, within that survey, they mentioned some of the startling findings in that survey, and that was 66%, and that's 2/3 of men who got in touch with us said that they had mental health struggles and said that they thought about suicide. 24%, that's nearly a quarter, said that they had attempted to take their own life. Ben, you sadly lost your younger brother, Sam. He was only 15 years old. Were you able to spot any signs of where he was in terms of the depression he was dealing with?
This was the thing, because at the time he obviously was 15 years old, and at that point he's a teenage boy going through all this stuff, and I didn't have any idea what mental health was, didn't have any idea what depression was. So when I went downstairs once and my mum sat me at the kitchen table and was like, look, I just thought I'd made you aware Sam's been having a tough time and he's been diagnosed with depression. I kind of just like shrugged it off. What's that? I don't know. Let's just move on. And throughout, you know, now looking back on it, you can see that things started to change. He was much more isolated. He'd go up to his room. He wouldn't really speak to us much. And looking back, obviously, you can go that, well, that's an obvious sign. But at the time, what's normal teenage behaviour, and what's actually something really, really sinister that's going to end up with me in this situation? It's really hard to tell at that age.
Garrick, one of the things that you've highlighted are the issues faced among ethnic minorities, among black men of a certain age. What have you found out in terms of what you found out within yourself, then also speaking to other people within your community?
Yeah, well, in fact, that's one of the reasons why I got involved with Time to Change and Rethink Mental Illness, for the very reason that many people that I talk to had difficulty getting help, and there's a whole set of reasons for that. We got to understand, for example, people from African Caribbean community have quite diverse culture. There's over 24 different Caribbean islands. There's 54 countries in Africa. So there's lots of diversity, different belief, different tradition, different cultural norms. So when we talk about, BAME community or BME community, we have to sort of drill down and get to understand, what are those communities. Some community will not seek help for various reasons. But for me, my involvement with Time to Change was to try and at least try to engage with the African Caribbean community about starting a conversation. Let's have a conversation. We have the motto, conversation changes life. That's the first step.
OK, well, Garrick, I can hear a lot more about the work that you're doing, and also I'll get some advice from the rest of you as well. Welcome back to Art 5 News Tonight's special Mental Health Breaking the Silence. Now, we've been hearing about some of the pressures men come under. Well, for between at least 1 in 15, the problems can start at the birth of their child. Now, postnatal depression has long been recognised as a condition for women, but it's not the case for men, and our survey of GPs shows just how confusing the picture is. Catherine Nash has this report.
Do you want to almost your finger. Here we go. Mwah.
Ross Hunt with his 2-year-old daughter Isabel. They may have a close bond now, but that's not always been the case. When Isabel was born, Ross developed postnatal depression, usually associated with new mothers. It was his experience of becoming a new father and witnessing a traumatic birth that brought the condition on.
I thought, obviously, I'm going to love her and she's going to mean everything to me, but it's just kind of nothing. It was a bit numb, and then after a while I started to dislike her a little bit and resent her. I used to get jealous of her, especially when she used to want Rachel's attention all the time, and we lost a lot of our time together, and it's just really hard work.
But Ross says the period after his daughter's birth was lonely and confusing, and was made worse by the fact that PND in men isn't always recognised.
And they skirt over the fact that a man is suffering, and getting caught up in the label of it often misses the whole point, and they don't seek the help sometimes.
So we asked 150 GPs about their experience of male patients showing symptoms of postnatal depression. Our survey found that nearly a quarter don't believe it's a male condition at all, yet more than 3/4 did. And those who do believe the condition exists in men, less than half have identified PND in male patients in the last 3 years. With the debate over whether postnatal depression can exist in men, this perinatal expert says hormone changes can affect new fathers too.
There are some hormonal changes in fathers. So at the very moment that child is born, we see some changes in those hormones. So like a drop in testosterone, a drop in cortisol and other such changes. And that opens the father up to a whole range of emotions they might not previously experienced.
The NHS has just announced new services to help support fathers like Ross Hunt.
Windy. It is windy, isn't it?
He's now got a second baby on the way and says talking about his experience of postnatal depression makes it easier to get through. Catherine Nash, 5 News.
Mark, let's be honest, this is going to be news to many people watching in terms of how men can face some postnatal depression. Not news to you. This is something you faced when your son was born 15 years ago.
Yeah, my story was a little bit different to Ross's. I self-managed my disorder, which I didn't know at the time, ADHD. So I've self-managed that all my life. Then I became a parent. Obviously witnessed a traumatic birth for me personally. My wife had emergency C-section. Then Michelle went on to have severe postnatal depression, where I was expecting to be back in work in 2 weeks. I was self-employed, and you had money worries, mortgage to pay. I was worried about social services. All the thoughts a mums get, dad's worried about too. I didn't know nothing about mental health in 2004. And like I said, this overwhelming feeling of love, I think I grew as I was home for 6 months as well. But I had a lot of family support, which a lot of families haven't got that support. When we know that 1 in 10 now dads actually suffer from postnatal depression, and up to 50% of dads will have depression looking after their partners with postnatal depression.
You have been working tirelessly to make sure that it's taken seriously by the NHS, by the World Health Organization. Why is it so important?
Yeah, I find it shocking that the World Health Organization, when we got millions, as we say, millions of suicides every year, a lot of these fathers are not getting picked up early enough. They go into other services. At crisis point, like myself, I was never diagnosed anything. It took a crisis point years later, and we're still not asking dad about his mental health, which I find shocking, because it does impact the mum as well as that has an impact on our development of that child too.
This is a real eye-opener, I said, for many, many people watching at home. Well, we have been asking for your stories and comments on all the issues we've been talking about tonight. Lots of you have been getting in touch with us. Daniel Stokes went to Facebook to say, I've been through this for the past year, and the last 6 weeks I've been to see a therapist, and it's really helped. We need more places to talk. Robert Reeves said this on our Facebook page, we don't talk because society teaches us that men should be strong and that any sign of sad emotions or feelings is weakness. And Nell Rutter said, you guys are awesome. He said a mouthful. Now, men have feelings too, and that should not be a sign of weakness. Having lost my husband to suicide, my heart goes out to these men. And remember, there are places you can go to in confidence. If you need to talk, the address for the Samaritans in Mind are on your screen there. And if you head to our Facebook page, you can find even more resources. Now, this show is all about the importance of breaking the silence. Lots of people watching might be experiencing mental health struggles. Others might want to know more about what they can do. Well, let's get back to the men who might be able to help. Darren, if you would give anybody at home any advice, anything they should be taking away from tonight's show, what would that be?
It would be to talk. People don't realise, that there is organisations out there that want to listen, and we don't necessarily want answers when you're talking about stuff. You just want someone to listen and get that chance to get it off your chest. I was very fortunate with Samaritans to get that person to speak to before then I got to any other sort of help. So if I was going to take anything out of it, it would certainly be that there's help out there. Yeah. There's help.
Luke, what about, as a society, what should we be doing more to help support men?
Some people get embarrassed, don't they? Because usually when you're embarrassed, it's something that's isolated to you. This problem that we're facing, I've not met anyone yet that ain't going through some troubles. So it's, be honest, be open, you know, and when you start to do that, like at our groups, listen, for us at Andy's Man Club, it's not about the group. It's about taking these conversations out onto the street, in your living rooms, at your workplaces, with your family, taking those masks off, being able to open up, being able to be honest with your loved ones, being able to get the help that you need, because ultimately all we all want to do is be happy, don't we? And that's what it's all about. And if you can start to show people what is good in their life, they'll stay around. And that's what it's about. Whether it's someone they appreciate, whether it's a goal that they've got, just keeping giving people those glimmers of hope.
And Leon, you've got a motto, don't you? What is your motto that you can share?
Fight it, get help, and talk. Those 5 words are powerful. I believe in them because I've lost loved ones, I nearly lost myself. And that's what I believe in. There's so many resources now that you can get help from. Samaritans, 116, 123. It's out there. Just hold on, don't give up. As we're all sitting here today, it's a really big deal and it's a positive movement. And the more of us that we see speaking and visualising what we can see out there with the whole fighting spirit, I believe as we come together collectively, that's the most powerful thing, when we come together collectively. No one is alone.
You've all said it all. Talk, 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 the main thing. Thank you so much for coming on tonight's special show. We will be carrying on in our conversation on Facebook. Johnny, it's really good to talk about that when you do face the problem, and people might think you've dealt with it and that's it. Mental health issues all sorted, we can now move on with life, and actually it can be the opposite. It can be something that you have to deal with every day sometimes.
Absolutely. Just like you know, if someone's diagnosed with something like diabetes, you know, you've always got to manage it. And, you know, but for mental health, though, people don't see it in that way. I know with me, when I had my first relapse, because I got really unwell when I was 20, it was okay for a little bit, then I had a relapse a few years later. And people started saying to me, oh, but I thought you were all right now. And, you know, you look so good, though. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, you've got no idea what's going on in my head. And for me, I've had a number of relapses and go back into hospital. And I know I have to look after my mental health, but it's taken me a long time, actually, to really kind of take it on board. Every time I have a relapse, it's like, it's not happening, this isn't happening, just push it away, push it away. And I know I wouldn't do that if I had a physical health issue. I just know I wouldn't. But so now I'm trying to take it more seriously, taking medication, therapy, mindfulness, and talking, being honest.
What should people say? What should people say when, even if to say, are you okay? But say it in a way that's helpful, engaging, really genuinely talking to you and showing a concern for how you are. Yeah, absolutely. And not adding their judgment in. I think that's key. The non-judgment, you're so worried about how people, I'm so worried about how people are going to respond, what they're going to say. Yeah, not judging, just holding that space, just listening. And I think actually there's a really good campaign out at the moment called Ask Twice by Time to Change, which I really like, which is all about, you know, if you're worried about someone, go back and ask again. Because I think, you know, some people are afraid. I know with my mates, like, if I know there's something wrong, I'll be like, oh, should I ask again? I don't want to intrude. But again, you could save a life if you just go in there. Don't be afraid to ask again. And just make sure you hold that space for someone. Don't add your judgment to it. Really hold that space and listen. The key is, I think, the listening. That's so key. In terms of what not to say, and many people spoke to us, one of the phrases that stood out, man up. I cannot tell you, we heard it in our VTs as well, that is the word, Luke, men do not want to hear man up.
It starts with his kids, that, doesn't it? You know, and starting with what a real man is. And people often think that it's weak to talk about how you feel, but I often say that actually it takes a stronger person to be able to take your mask off and open up. But back to what Johnny was saying as well, do you know, people often use this connotation of a broken leg. You know, they have to say, so you wouldn't do that with someone with a broken leg, but I don't like that analogy, because after a broken leg's done, it's fixed. You know, where I think of it more like rupturing a ligament. So in rugby, when I played rugby, rupture a ligament, you've constantly got to look after that now, forever. Otherwise, me and Liam were talking about earlier about when he's getting running his knees, probably we don't look after him anymore. It's like his mind, isn't it? Yeah. You've constantly got to be looking after yourself. And if we're all constantly dialed in on his phones, I know people are going to be on Facebook now, but if we're all constantly dialed in, listening to the wrong stuff, getting wrong information, we're going to feel that. But back to a man up thing, yeah, it's about being, you know what, it depends how you look at man up. If we all start flipping term what man up means speak up. Let's say man up. Let's look how we look at that. So let's take his mask off and man up.
Ben, you now go into schools. What are the issues that boys are facing today?
What are the issues? Wow, we could go on for ages about these things.
Indeed.
There's so many pressures, especially in school. You know, there's a very macho environment from where I grew up. In the schools I was at, it was all like, hit the gym, get the girls, drink the drink, and that's your man. And it's just not true. You can be yourself, and you can get your group of friends. You can be a little bit different, and maybe not seen by everyone else as this manly figure, whatever that means. But you still be like normal in your own way. And I think I'll just come back to what you've both been saying, and I think it's true. You know, you can't just assume it's all going to go away and you're all going to be happy and joy for the rest of your life. But I think people need to know that you can get to a point where it's fine and you are okay, but you're dealing with it, but you're okay, and there's a moment. And I know this would have been something that my brother would have liked to have heard, because he thought that you're either there or you're here for your whole life, and you're either depressed, that's you for life, or you're okay for life. But actually, this fluctuates, and as long as you can deal with it, you can get to a level where you can cope and you can live your life very normally. But that's where the dealing with it comes in.
Well, there were some really interesting findings in our survey about who men felt most comfortable talking to about their problems. 32% found it easier to talk to other men, while 24% said they preferred to talk to women. And for 20%, it was their partner, but 23% said they didn't want to talk to anyone. How do you feel? Who did you want to talk to? Leon, was there anybody you wanted to turn to, you could find it easier to talk to?
See, I was coming from a team environment. I was playing Premiership football at the time, and I started really noticing that I had severe problems, especially with depression. And I think no one wants to be judged. There's an embarrassment factor there where you know, especially in that kind of environment that I was in, there's so many people out there today who just don't want to speak, just for the simple reason of pointing fingers and people's mentality about the whole, you know, depression and, you know, the whole man up thing, oh, you'll get over it and you'll be all right. Those kind of cliche expressions. But for me, I mean, there's one situation where, you know, I speak all over the UK now, and I went into a construction company, and there was a guy that comes in every day, and I spoke to them all, and he was the one that spoke after, and there's a guy that comes in every day, gets on with it, head down, gets on with it. No one really speaks to him, no one really says anything, just they take the mick out of him in that kind of team environment, but no one really asked what's going on. He held his hand up and he said, I'd like to say something and thank you for what you spoke about, but I'm really struggling. And he said, like, me and my wife have just lost our baby, like, born and literally a few weeks later died. No one ever knew that here because I don't really speak. Honestly, if you saw the room, it was unbelievable. Like, there was people in there, all guys, and they were like, one guy put his hand up, said, oh my gosh, like, I'm so sorry. Like, I've always kind of taken a mick out of you every day, just felt like you was moody all the time, nothing to say. Another guy put his hand up, I'm really sorry, I'm so sorry, like, for everything. Just, I never ever said, are you all right? It's so simple just to ask someone, if you see the man, especially in a work environment, if you see someone's mannerisms change, it's just to say, are you all right? That simple. And that's what I got from that particular talk. Just expressing that, you know what, it's okay to not be okay. And if you come in, whether it's work environment or you go home to a family member, just say, you know what, I'm having a bad day. And it's just trying to understand, like you say, Champ, about there is a balance and there is a coping mechanism. You can be there. I've been there and I've been there and I've been there. But there is a point where you can find that little balance and still be productive with your day. And if it doesn't start well, you can finish it well.
Mark, you really struggled with talking to friends and family. You couldn't even talk to your wife. At one point, you said you went to your car to get away from talking. Also, you didn't want your wife to worry about you.
Yeah, well, my wife had severe postnatal depression, so I didn't want to add that pressure onto her. So I was having suicidal thoughts for about 4 or 5 months after my son was born. But it wasn't until years later, coming from a mining community, and very much my father never talked about mental health, my grandfather, we never talked about mental health. And as we know, we all got mental health. we should be talking about, but it was a case of like using drink, you know, when I had anxiety. I was physically fit. I was doing a lot of sport, you know, and it was impacting on my physical health then as well. And I used to drive up in the woods and pretend to go work and hide in the car. And it wasn't until I had obviously a breakthrough. I was in community mental health services, ADHD and all that stuff came out years later. But it was a case of talking to a guy in the gym. I said to a guy, I said, can I borrow the weights? And he said, yeah, I got to go to his NHS pram. I said, what's that? Oh, my wife's got postnatal depression. I said, oh, and my wife had postnatal depression too. And we had a conversation. And I told him more things in 5 minutes that I've never told my best mates for 30 odd years, because he understood and I understood, so.
Darren, you say you reached your turning point 4-5 years ago, is that right?
Yeah.
What did it for you? How did suddenly you realise, oh my goodness, I've actually my issues run far deeper than I ever thought they would do?
Again, it's a similar story to what we've heard all the way through the broadcast, really. I found with addiction and whatnot, and I was trying to hide it from people, and I ended up getting to a stage where nobody wants to talk to me. People wouldn't answer the phone, stuff like that. And it was nothing against me. It was just because of the way I was as a person. And then that's when the thoughts come in about thinking about taking my own life. If I hadn't, I'm fortunate enough that if I hadn't spoke to a professional previous and they'd brought up Samaritans, I would have never have tried it. I was in a situation, no one else, and I just dialed. It was that choice it's changed my life, really, that choice.
See, what a lot of people do there is to cope, to numb the pain. They might then, that's where addiction comes into it, because then they might say, right, you know what, there's drink, I'll come familiar with drink, or alcohol, shall we say, come familiar with drugs, come familiar, whatever it is that will just numb that pain for that moment in time where you feel like you feel, then that's where problems can really leak. So then you're going from mental health, falling into addiction. It's a quick, you know, it's so deep, and again, that's why it's so important to talk straight away.
Garrick, we touched on it previously, talking about the issues of mental health among the BAME community, the Black community. You say in the Caribbean, something that traditionally you wouldn't even talk about mental health issue.
I mean, one of the most important things is to really understand how culture really make a difference, because those words, mental health, many of the Black African Caribbean community don't use those words. It's a Western thing. They don't understand what that means. So back in your own culture, if you're not well, they'll say you're crazy, you're mad, you know, you need to go to the asylum. We never use the word mental health. But for me, coming into a time to change has given me a lot of resources that I can use to try and at least support people and direct people where they can get help. So for example, we talk about conversation, we talk about talking, but when I try to talk to many of our own community, the stigma is a big issue. A lot of professional people don't want to admit that they have an issue with their own mental health. They get embarrassed, they feel they couldn't go to another professional, they're going to be judged, they're concerned about how people will view them. I mean, I was working at university when I had to give up my job, so as a professional, for me, going to occupational health over a period of time, you say, oh, well, I'm sorry, I think, you know, you need to take some time out, wasn't something that was comfortable with me. But my view is that we can't give up, and we at least need to seek help. It's important to seek help. Now, we talk about breaking the silence, and the silence is when we don't talk. So we need to at least have somebody that we can talk with. And sometimes people within your own family are the most difficult people to talk with. You might be better talking to a stranger than your own family. I know families, husband and wife, and he or she wouldn't talk to each other about their mental health. They keep it quiet inside, but they might tell somebody else about it. And, you know, if we don't have that conversation, we're never going to get help. And then we talk about what sort of help is out there. Most of us, we are supporting other people, but we need to think about supporting ourselves. What about our own mental health and well-being? So for me, I do campaign work with Time for Change, but I also set up a program to help our own champions in the peer support group so that people can come together and support each other and share their struggle, etc. So it's not just about campaigning and helping other people. You've got to look after your own self.
I mean, all of you have started your campaigns, and in terms of what you've learned from the work that you started and how you work and support other people, what's the one thing you can take away you've learned from the campaigning you do?
That no one's immune. Yeah. No one's immune. That's the thing. You know, I speak to, particularly, you know, when I speak to maybe young people in schools, some of them say to me, "Oh no, you know, I'm strong. I'm never going to get mental health issues.
Yeah.
This doesn't sort of apply to me." I'm like, you never know. That no one is immune. Anything can happen at any time. Do you know what I mean? You know, whether it's grief or loss of, you know, a job or something happens. It could be situational, and that's it. You know, that's what I've learned. No one is immune, and so many people are affected. I mean, kind of like you were saying, in going into companies as well, the amount of people that come up afterwards and say, if it's not them affected, it's someone that they know. Everyone knows someone that is affected by mental health.
Well, thank you all so much for coming on to 5 News, sharing your stories, hopefully helping others. I'm afraid that is all we have time for on this programme. Thank you so much for watching this 5 News special. 5 News will be back tomorrow from 5. Have a good night. Bye-bye.